hard, and I done good, didn't I? Start Melissa down that road. I think we've got most of the names, but just in case we don't, how about we say who we are and if we're mediating or not, or how long, or how often, or what kind, or who we're married to, or whatever. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Catherine Over, and I'm an attorney. I mainly do abuse and neglect right now for the Department of Children and Family Services. I moved to Chicago about 2 years ago, and I took a mediation course through CCR, and I mediated quite a bit my first year, and I haven't been mediating lately. I've just been too busy, but I'm planning to start again. Actually, my first mediation course I took was in the early 90s when I was out on the West Coast. So I mediated for many years, but right now I'm not actively mediating. But hopefully soon I will be.
I'm Erica Blade-Elcock. I'm staff here at CCR. I work under, it's a project, sort of project, kind of. It's the Center for Analysis of ADR Systems. And we study the different systems that are in place here in Illinois.
I'm Cookie Lovitz. I'm a mediator and trainer and on the board.
I'm Ann Shablum. I'm a retired school psychologist. I trained as a mediator this past summer.
I'm Ina Haugen. I'm Ann's sister visiting. I used to be a mediator in Minneapolis, community mediation. Now I live in California working as a psychologist in prison.
I'm Audrey Bartlett. I mediate at IHDR, and I've been doing that for about 2 years. I'm slowing down a little bit, so I want to concentrate more on my skills of what I'm doing, focus a little bit more.
Not just churn them out.
Right. Think about it. Have time to reflect a little bit more.
Greg Bartlett, Audrey's spouse, or husband, supporter. Here just to listen and learn.
Susie Schrader, and I'm case manager here.
Again.
Steve Kuhn, I'm a former mediator.
And I'm Melissa Schwartz. I'm a case manager here as well.
And as Melissa said, I'm M. Griffin, and I've been mediating here for about 6-7 years, and have done some training and some peer evaluation. We have a committee that sits in with other people, and I've been in with 1 or 2 of you. That's been fun. Good to see. I'm going to ask you to, yeah, we've got time. I've got a 7-minute tape here that's it's kind of fun. Introduces the idea of mediation. You all know what mediation is, but I thought you might get a kick out of seeing this. And so much of humor, whether in mediation or any place else, is a matter of our mindset. Are we having a humorous frame of mind? And so let's start, and if you just go on over.
You want to know about our mindset?
Pardon?
Don't we have to speak about our mindset?
Why don't you introduce yourself as we're going over? We've just gone around.
Okay, I'm Patricia Deere, and I've mediated here for about 5 or 6 years, and I also train here.
Okay, let's let it roll, Susie, and we'll turn on some lights. Let's see, dinner for 2, appropriate for this time of night. You don't have to worry too much on the volume. There's more words. Film catalog, yeah, you know, when you're a teacher, you get lots of the idea of that it spreads and splashes on the community. That conflict isn't just one or two people, that it spreads. Well, welcome to a session on humor and mediation. Melissa made out that was you, wasn't it, Melissa, that made, or Susie, that made the flyer. and sent it out, and there was something about how many mediators does it take to change a light bulb, and I do not know the answer to that, but by the end of the time, one of you will tell me, or Susie will. Incidentally, a friend just came in. Her name is Jackie, and she is the wife of a man down in Texas who gives me great help in my writing. He's a consultant on my Con Theory book, and since he has started helping me, it's sold double what it did before I just got the figures.
Oh, wow.
So, Jackie, it's nice to have you
Thanks for
here.
inviting me.
She is a PhD in communication in her own right. So, nice to have you here, Jackie. Most of us have done some kind of mediation or been in a conflict situations, even if it's not mediation. I thought we'd start by talking about what is the funniest or most ridiculous or most embarrassing situation that you have been in mediation or in a conflict situation. Just to prime the pump, I'll tell you two. One is mine and one is Brad's, because I talked to Brad earlier today and I knew he had one, and I got the details today. Brad, for those of you who don't know, is our director here at CCR. For me, it was about my second year of mediating at CCR, and as you know, you walk in, you have no idea what you're getting. And it was two women. They were both a minority race and different races. And one was married to a fella named Leon, who was a truck driver. She said very early on he used crack cocaine, but she had gotten a new job and that had benefits, and he had said he'd go for treatment. The other woman was Leon's mistress, and was also his supplier of the cocaine, of the crack. And they had both threatened each other to kill each other. They left notes on windshields. They called each other at work, at home, etc. And they pretty much just yelled at each other the whole time. I had to do a lot of shuttling, not our regular model here, but when they were together, it was very tough. But I did have, when I brought them back to second crosstalk, it became obvious that they only agreed on two things. One is that they hated each other with a fierce passion, and that they never wanted to see each other again. And they actually ended up having an agreement by turfing the city. You go here, I'll go here. I never need to go over this street. You don't have, and how far the one woman could come within Leon's house, and I mean, you know, would it hold? I don't know. I ended up writing the agreement for the sake of the kids, if nothing else, because that was the wife's concern, was that she never wanted this woman around her kids. And she told me in caucus, she said, I don't care if he gets a little nookie from her. She said, every man's got to get a little something on the side. And I said, well, not every man. Oh, yeah, every man. If you haven't, you will. But, I mean, it was just a wild mediation, and the only other thing they could agree on was when I asked them, when they were together, I said, where's Leon? Why isn't Leon? Oh, Leon's a wimp. They both agreed. That Leon would not, no way could Leon handle this. But they both loved him. That was a weird mediation. Brad's was a little bit different, an event in a mediation. It was an employment thing, and he was talking to the plaintiffs who were charging discrimination. In this case, they were Hispanic, and two brothers. And the one that really was bringing the charges didn't speak English hardly at all, and his brother marginally. But they were in caucus, and they had come in with a demand that they get something like $10,000. And Brad in caucus said, now, would you like to share with me another amount? And he said they went and blah, 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 talked a bit, and then came back and said, how much? And the guy was reaching for his wallet. They thought Brad was trying to get a bribe, yeah. And Brad said it's the most embarrassing situation he's been in on, and he said, no, yeah, more, and well, how about you? It may not be a dramatic one, but I don't want to force anybody to speak, but this is going to be real interactive. What funny or embarrassing situations have you been in?
I had what
Steve?
was embarrassing and I guess a bit funny. About 6 years ago, I had some teenagers in mediation, and they used the young fellows used the term gang banging. And I didn't know
I
what
can
that
hear
meant in
what's coming.
today's terminology. And I thought, my God, how can their parents were there. I thought, how can these kids use that word in front of their parents? The mother used the term, and when she talked a little bit, and I thought, there's something going on there. And during caucus, I ran out and talked to some younger people and said, what does this term mean? And they clued me in. And then I knew what was going on.
Okay, it didn't mean a big rape.
No, it didn't mean a big rape nor a small one. It meant standing on the corner making lots of noise.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have one similar, a little graphic, but I had a case here a couple of years ago, and it was an ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, and at one point she said something like, I'm not going to remember if I remember this, something like, you know, he's catting me, or he's catting around, or something about cat. And I'm listening, and it's the same thing I didn't understand, so I always, you know, jump in. Well, can you explain what you're talking? Because they talked about that for a while, and I really couldn't figure out what it was. And they both, I guess this is where humor can help. They both got hysterical. He wants my pussy. I didn't know this was another term. It was like, okay, and I mean, they were hysterical.
Then it would have been
Is
funny
that
if you
the-
said,
is
and
that
what's
the only
pussy?
yet you
That
have?
would have been right. Then they would have.
We just get our drums clear.
But I've never heard. I didn't know. So you know, right? Sometimes
Well,
they bet
there's
you.
a play right over there about that, called Cats, but.
That's what that's about. So I had an employee discrimination case, and this was with a city and one of their employees, a city close to here. And so they sent their HR person from the city and the attorney from the city. And there was an African-American man who had been a janitor for the city for years and years, and he had not gotten a promotion. A white person from the outside had been brought in to take a supervisory position. And he was asking for a promotion. And in caucus, basically, the HR people were saying, there is just no way, you know, there's nothing, we have nothing for him, there's all these reasons why, you know, he's not getting the job level. And they, as they're telling me, basically, their grievances against him, it sounded like, you know, they were describing this uppity nigger. And I'm listening to all these things that they're saying about him, and it sounds an awful lot like leadership qualities. And so I'm saying, and so I just looked at them and I said, you mean like JFK? And they kind of looked at me like, well, I said, you know, this kind of forward thinking, wanting to push forward on things like that he seems to be portraying, and they kind of went, yeah. And later, yeah, really, it just blurted out. And later, when we were writing up, it did settle to everybody's great satisfaction. And they said to me, as I was writing this all down, they said, are you related to the Kennedy family? No, I'm not. And they said, well, how did you think of that? I said, well, it just sounds like, and they said they actually admitted that's what turned it around for them. So
That's very powerful.
Oh, that's
Very
great.
powerful.
You have sort of leapfrogged into an area that we're going to talk about. How do you consciously, intentionally use humor to move a mediation? And it's a great example, and I'm going to remember it and file it in my mind for the next time I do something like this. It's reframing the whole back to them.
I should walk around with you guys so you don't have to stare at me. I mediated a case at the Department of Human Rights and Employment Discrimination case, and it was a sexual harassment case with the mayor's office of a town in Illinois. And the mayor had 2 attorneys as well as the man who was under the mayor, who was actually being accused of the sexual harassment, and then the woman who was filing the charge with 2 attorneys as well. And the mayor was the one who was sitting next to me on the respondent side. And he was real, like, very uppity, very boisterous guy. And at one point he turned to me, just trying to explain to me how good of a man his employee is, you know, how he would never do this. And he turned to me and he said, I mean, Missy, Alyssa, what do you think? And he said, oh, that would be sexual harassment in today's day and age. And afterwards I thought I really could have used that to my advantage, but
That's like the office.
yeah.
Incidentally, are you okay with that? Do you want to file a charge?
Well, I'll think about it.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll mediate.
Sorry.
Okay.
Mine's so trivial. I haven't had any humorous moments or things I can really laugh about, except at myself. I went into one mediation. It was a juvenile dispute, and it's a father and son, and of course they were both named Edward, Eddie, whatever. And so I checked names initially, and father was going to be Edward, son was going to be Eddie. And of course the entire mediation I proceeded to get it wrong. And it was just a case where, you know, I would have thought that I was trying so hard to say Edward, Eddie, get it right, you know. I would have thought at 1 second they could have cracked a smile because I'm trying so hard. And sometimes people don't have a sense of humor. So I guess I'm kind of intrigued about this seminar.
Yeah, you may walk away an hour and a half from now and conclude that you are the only one that does and none of us do.
Well, that's one of my questions. I laugh in mediations,
Mhm.
but I wonder how people take that sometimes.
Yeah.
There's some stuff I, you know, like I would have been laughing at myself.
Right.
I'd imagine it's catching.
I hope so.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I think I've had that experience.
Often can be, and we're going to look at some different times when it seems to usually be catchy and at times where it can catch you up and not be good. Just a quickie on it, though. If the laughter is at ourselves, we're always safe. If the laughter is at them, we're usually in trouble. If it's at a situation, it can go either way depending on how serious the situation is. And I don't mean necessarily the whole issue in mediation, but the localized thing that we're laughing about. But there are exceptions to all of these things. And my purpose today for saying I wanted to do a session on humor is to encourage you to push the boundaries a little bit, to try. My full name is Emery, and when I saw that in the New Yorker, I thought I better
You should have that on a card in front of you when you're mediating.
That's right. Yeah. But I would hope, Patricia, that do you like Pat or Patricia?
Patricia.
Yeah, I would hope, Patricia, you would not be squelched.
From the point.
Yeah, there are times and places, and sometimes IDHR is a little more grim than others. You know, it's the professional. Not always. I would hope you can come in by the time the night's over. Any others that we should get out on the table? Just, you know, informal conflict in family or things that struck you as funny.
I'll share one. This wasn't here though, this is where
Okay.
the other place that I mediate, and it was between, you know, divorcing husband and wife, and they couldn't stop bickering. I mean, you know, to get them to talk or focus on the kids was like impossible, and it was just like, well, you did this, no, I didn't do this, well, you did that, back and forth for like what seemed like a very long time. And I did everything I could think of to sort of like, well, let's talk about this, let's talk about that, back to the bickering. So finally I stopped at one point and I said, I'm going to keep score. and I drew a line, and one gave a jab at one. I said, good one, okay, and then came back, you know, and then they started, you know, to laugh after. I don't know if you could do that in the first session. I think it was probably a second session, but it was like, you know, it's like I had nothing to do other than I'll just keep scoring. You know, we'll see where we are at the end of
Interesting
the
that you
hour.
found a function for yourself in that. You know,
Like,
it's a
but they
reframe of your own function there.
Yeah,
And they got the
and
point.
it's a great reality testing. Do you hear what you are saying? When
And
I
it's
was in,
fact. I mean,
when I
it's
was in
fact,
college,
so.
I had a fraternity brother who, you know, these are not places where usually language is sanitized, but I had a fraternity brother who was just raw all the time, and finally we used to keep count of when he said a word that wasn't obscene. And, you know, same idea there, the way of dealing with it. Well, I like cartoons. As Melissa knows from, and certainly as Jackie knows from a book I write, I put cartoons in my books. And for a theory book, that's a bit unusual because, you know, those are supposed to be pretty staid, kind of like mediation, they often think. And I have found that it can be helpful. It helps lock in. And I've got a file of mediation cartoons and conflict cartoons, and I thought you might get a kick out of some of them. And there are lots of them. You recognize many mediations that you have run there. And of course, there's a lot of people that never come to the point of Calvin and Hobbes there to realize this is a lousy game. It's sort of a stupid game run. But sometimes it takes people really getting hurt before they'll come to mediation. And sometimes it's big. You know, it hangs over. We have friends who had 2 Dobermans, and we'd go visit them and sit on a low couch like that, and the Dobermans would hang over, and they'd say, but before they let them out, they said, would you like to see the dogs? Okay, you know, and after that, the conversation stopped. I mean, you could not, about anything else, you could not help but talk about the dogs. I have a friend, though, whose daughter tried suicide, and they never talked about it in the family, ever. You know, and finally a therapist said, what do you have, what does a girl have to do to have you talk about it? You know, try again. And, you know, that's what mediation is. It's a chance to talk. Sometimes there is a power imbalance and you may not get to the table. Why negotiate? But then sometimes we can be very surprised, and you know, suddenly the chance comes